Hello, my name's Mel Bligh, and welcome to this masterclass around getting menopause awareness on the agenda in your organisation. My organisation's Thrive Leadership, and we run menopause awareness for people leaders. I guess my first question to you today is why are you here, or why are you watching this recording? Um, I'm guessing you think that menopause is a significant issue for your organisation, and you are maybe struggling to get it on the top of the agenda in your workplace. I totally understand this. There are a lot of things competing for your time and attention, and sometimes people think menopause isn't a significant business issue. It is, and over the next wee while, I'm going to share with you why it's important and help you build your own business case. So hopefully that's a useful use of your time. The business case is very clear for menopause awareness, and I'm going to use a case study as we go through this session to help you understand that business case. We know that if we can get this right in our organisations, it's got significant impacts around employee retention and also can help us reduce turnover costs, which is really important considering how competitive the world of attraction is for talent at the moment. It can also help us reduce absence costs and understand absence a bit better so that we can take positive action to reduce absence. And it can also help us enhance employee progression. So we know that one of the challenges around menopause is attrition, but also how do we get people to progress during this time? Ultimately, if we can get this right, we should see higher levels of employee engagement and productivity. Um, so as we go through this session, I'm going to give you some data around each of these areas for you to make some notes about and build your own case. So by the end of this session, you should have everything you need to get this on the agenda. So either have a pen and paper or some technology to gather your thoughts as we go throughout. Some of the things I hear quite often and common objections to, I guess, menopause awareness and support is we've got a menopause policy. Isn't that enough? And also, surely this is just a well-being initiative, isn't it? And isn't it a bit niche? I can't go on without saying, well, 50% of the population doesn't feel much of a niche to me. But as we progress, hopefully you'll see me dispel each of these issues and these questions. But we'll come back to them later on in the session. So to help you gather your own data, I'm going to use a case study. We're going to call this company Engager Limited, and I'm going to give you some facts around Engager. So they're a fairly large organisation. They've got 5,000 employees, and 900 of those are in some stage of menopause. When we say menopause, we're talking about the perimenopause, which is the time running up to the final period, and postmenopause. Um, so on national data, we believe that's around 18% of our workforce are in this stage of their life. In Engager as well, we've got colleagues from all different levels of the organisation, from frontline operational staff to key decision makers, strategic colleagues. So my first question to you in this session, I'm going to ask you a few, is how many colleagues do you have, women, could be trans men or non-binary colleagues, who are between the ages of 40 and retirement age? This is the population you need to be looking at when you're assessing your risk. When we think about perimenopause, it's quite standard to start this post 40. Any menopause itself, the final period before 45, is seen as an early menopause, but we know the perimenopause can start several years before that final period. So I believe to have a good your arms around this data, 40 to retirement age is the right demographic to be looking at. So I'm going to start by looking at employee retention. We know that during this time of menopause, 1 in 4 women consider leaving the workplace due to menopausal symptoms. That's 25%. And on average, this is average data based on Oxford economics data, it costs £30,000 to hire, induct, and upskill a new colleague. That's an average conservative figure. What I would say is if somebody's a senior leader, so somebody on your senior leadership team or board, it's going to be at least twice their annual salary to do that. So if you know you've got some key strategic decision makers in your numbers, you may want to account for that financial that's associated with it. If we just unpick the recruitment data, that's £5,700 just for the recruitment piece. And again, that'll be much higher for a senior leader. So if we extrapolate that for Engager, that's 225 colleagues who are thinking leaving the organisation due to menopause. That's £6.75 million of risk. And if we look at the recruitment slice alone, that's £1.28 million. Now, in reality, we know that 1 in 10 women currently leave the workplace due to menopause. So if we extrapolate that from the 900 employees and Engager, that's 90 employees quitting due to menopause. 2.7 million risk in terms of rehiring, upskilling, and inducting those people. And that's over £500,000 of recruitment costs. Again, I believe these figures are fairly conservative, but if you look at those numbers in terms of your organisation, it should give you a ballpark figure. Like I say, if you know you've got some senior leaders in those numbers, you can inflate those somewhat. Also, we know that absenteeism can be a challenge during this time. When it comes to menopause, we know that about 50% of women will have some symptoms, 25 severe symptoms, and 25% none at all. So it's not a standard universal experience. There are over 40 symptoms of the menopause, so actually they won't all be going through exactly the same thing at all. But these symptoms can lead to absence. And based on the data we've gathered through the Women Inequalities Committee, we know that 43% of people say they've taken time off for symptoms. I believe this is conservative because in many organisations, people are not sharing when they've taken time off. But we'll use the 43% as a starting point for our business case. Ultimately, it does make sense for organisations to be investing in certain workplace practices during this time, using things like making reasonable adjustments, utilising flexible working practices, and adjusting our policies to allow people to stay in the workplace rather than people having more time out. So I guess my second question to you is, what work practices do you have available to support colleagues during menopause in your workplace? And you probably already have lots of things available at your disposal. So if we go back to Engager and look back at the data, that's 387 people taking a day off due to menopause symptoms, 2,817 hours lost of productivity. And if we take the average of £16.60 as a UK hourly wage, that equates to £46,762 lost due to absence. Again, you may have colleagues with a much higher wage than that. So if on the whole that's low, you can inflate that somewhat to represent the wage cost in your organisation. That's the average UK hourly wage. We also know, as well as trying to retain talent during this time, we also have issues around progressing talent during this time. And that's because most colleagues who are going through menopause are in what we call the sandwich generation, so they may still have children at home, elderly parents to look out for. They may have really challenging roles, lots to deal with in their lives, and then menopause comes and lands on top. So that can be, I guess, the straw that breaks the camel's back and make people lean out rather than leaning in. Um, so there are some facts that are really quite, alarming around that. So we know at this time, 14% of women will reduce their hours. That's very common. 8% of women have decided against applying for promotions. I know from my discussions with women that many are able to be on the senior leadership team and they decide not to be because it's just too much on top of everything else. 13% are considering early retirement, which I find really alarming, especially as women are 50 plus women are the fastest growing segment in our workplace. So unless we address this, we've got a significant hole in our bucket that we can't afford in our labour market. And if we think about the impact of all of this, it's really having a negative impact on diversity and representation on boards, senior leadership teams, and throughout the organisation. What we want is organisations that reflect our customer base and society so that we can serve them better. If we see a gap in a certain demographic, then that's a real issue in terms of us being able to deliver to clients as well as supporting our workplace. Also, societally, I think there are issues with people considering early retirement. If those people are financially secure, it's got no mega impact on them, but actually those people may not be financially secure and could head to pension poverty. So for me, this work's really important, not just from our own organisational perspective, but from a societal perspective. Now, we know if menopause isn't supported appropriately, it can impact productivity. What I would say is if we can support it well, there's every chance that it can enhance productivity. But we know if it's left without any support, it can impact our productivity. So we have to think about some of the symptoms that could happen during this time and what we can do about that. It does make sense for us to provide support and reasonable adjustments to help mitigate and reduce productivity loss. I think if we show our support to colleagues, then that translates into emotional engagement, and colleagues will probably go above and beyond what we expect them to do because they feel valued during this time. That's really important, and it's something we can do fairly simply with awareness. So some of the things we might do if you think about reasonable adjustments, things that, can be to do with environmental adjustments, to do with fans, cold water, etc. Utilising flexible working practices. If people are having quite a lot of sleeplessness, can we adjust shift patterns? And also helping people access some of those brilliant resources you probably already have in your workplace. Employee assistance programs that may have a counselling element. You might have well-being tools, well-being champions, menopause champions. How can you help people utilise some of those great things that already exist? I think a lot of the work we do at Thrive is around trying to create a culture of support, a culture where we've got psychological safety so that people can be open and honest and ask for assistance if they want it. And that's a really important if, because not everybody will want to ask for support. What we know, though, from current data from the Fawcett Society is that a lot of colleagues are not comfortable asking for support. 46% of colleagues will not disclose symptoms because they worry how they'll be perceived by their colleagues, their managers. And I guess that links to the fact that people worry, 41%, that their abilities will be questioned. And alarmingly, 41% have witnessed menopause being treated as a joke by colleagues. So that does the opposite of creating psychological safety. It makes somebody feel like the butt of a joke. And during this time, we are impacted in terms of how we feel, our identity, our self-belief. So that will really help somebody feel more insecure and less supported. So when we take that from Engager, there are about 414 colleagues who are not comfortable disclosing their symptoms and getting the support they need. That's significant, right? So my question to you, my next question is, does your organisation cultivate a culture that encourages supportive conversations about menopause? Does that culture exist, or is there work to do? Okay, so I mentioned before that actually it would make more sense for us to retain talent rather than attract new talent, because we've got a labour market that's pretty difficult currently. Um, According to the latest data, 50% of employers have hard to fill vacancies. 70% of employers plan on recruiting in the next 3 years. And 36% of HR leaders say that their current sourcing strategies aren't sufficient to attract the skill sets and people they need. So never more has it been more important to attract the brilliant skills we've got, those amazing people who have got a lot of experience, a lot of insight. We need to protect it. It's silly to let it walk out the door. My next question is, are you doing enough to retain that brilliant talent, those amazing colleagues you already have? I often refer to menopause as a little hole in the bucket of our workplaces. We are losing talent. It might not be in huge gushing torrents, it might be a drip, drip, drip. But because we're not really clear on why people are exiting the workplace, we don't have the data to do anything about it. We're just letting people exit. So I think it's a real opportunity for us to get more proactive as employers, to make sure that we understand what's going on. And when we're doing exit interviews, we really try and create that culture of people being honest about it. Hopefully, if we do create a supportive culture, people will decide not to leave anyway, because they'll feel like they're in a great place, and a place that values them, that gives them a voice, whatever their age and whatever they're going through. So coming back to the business case, we've talked about the cost of attrition, the cost of absence. So if we think about you creating a really simple business case yourself, I want you to look at the number of employees you have. So looking at your workforce, how many women, trans men, non-binary colleagues do you have between the ages of 40 and 60? How does that translate into attrition costs? So we said, didn't we, £30,000 per colleague on average. So we need to, do the numbers there. And then the absence cost as well, based on 43% of colleagues taking a day. What's the cost of that? Some more qualitative stuff to think about as well is, what's the cultural cost of us not doing anything at the moment, or not doing a great deal? How is that impacting our employee engagement levels, our employee relations environment, for example? And what are the implications we've got in terms of hiring, in terms of diversity and inclusion? Do we have a workforce that represents society but also represents our client base, which again has got a cultural impact? And what are our exposures legally as well? This session will touch on the law, but it's not all about it. But actually, there is an expectation from the powers that be that we do support menopause in the workplace. We do make reasonable adjustments, and we are aware of when our colleagues are going through certain challenges. Another nice way of you capturing a business case or an additional piece of data to add to the business case is doing a SWOT analysis. Obviously, you've probably seen SWOTs many times. Strengths and weaknesses are internal dimensions, opportunities and threats are external. I've just populated with this with some examples. So it might be that in your organization, um, you have got a lovely culture, people are supportive, and people care about this topic. So you've got quite a nice basis to work from. But right now, there is no menopause guidance. So there's no policy or guidelines. We've not got anything really documented. And your leaders have a low readiness to support menopause and have the necessary conversations. Also, the organisation's not prioritising this as an issue right now or an opportunity. When we think about opportunities, the biggest one really is to be seen as an employer of choice. So a market leader when it comes to being menopause friendly. Are we seen as a company who really values our colleagues and wants to retain them and will do things to support them during this time? And some of the biggest threats could be around attracting talent. So actually, you know, I don't see anything from that company about attracting 45 plus women into the workplace. Um, Also, there's a huge legal threat of us doing nothing. It's really not an option. So we could be coming up against potential discrimination claims, harassment, victimization. So sometimes we talk about banter. Actually, if we have ongoing banter, that could be seen as victimization. So culturally, we need to sort of make sure that we're on the right page, really, to prevent some of this stuff. I mean, also as well with the law, any colleague who's been employed for 2 years has the right to unfair dismissal. Um, and under the Equalities Act, menopause is captured under age, sex, and disability. So they're the three protected characteristics that cover menopause. And we are seeing a year-on-year increase of tribunals citing menopause as the culture slowly shifts and changes. We've seen some very high profile cases. This session isn't about the law, but I'm happy to talk to any of you about it further if that's an interest that you've got. We saw a really high brightness case last year from Direct Line. Direct Line had to lost a tribunal when they didn't support a colleague. So this one particular colleague was suffering with symptoms such as brain fog, concentration, and memory problems. Her boss ignored the symptoms and kicked in the process for underperformance. And basically, that was seen as unacceptable. So you can see here there's a quote from Baroness Faulkner from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, basically saying employers have responsibility to support somebody going through menopause. It's their benefit as well as the organisations. So there is an expectation that that happens now. Just as an aside as well, when we come to disability, clearly menopause isn't a disability, but if somebody's in that 25% bracket where they've got very severe symptoms and they're impacting them significantly for more than 12 months, that's when it will be seen as a disability in the eyes of the law. So we can't just do nothing anymore. So if we come back to our common objections, we've got a menopause policy. Isn't that enough? It's really not. A menopause policy is a great start, but actually what's more important is we adopt the right behaviour as organisations. So we help our leaders understand menopause, but also what their role is. We help them have the right conversations with their people so that they're not at risk. And so people do feel supported and feel psychologically safe. Menopause, often I get inquiries about doing menopause sessions based off the well-being angle. There is an element of well-being in menopause, but there's also talent retention, diversity and inclusion, employee engagement benefits. This is something that can hit a huge amount of indicators in terms of performance for your business. Us trying to retain brilliant talent is massively bigger than well-being. And isn't it niche? Well, I don't think 51% of the population is niche. Also, we know that those colleagues who aren't physically experiencing menopause will have an emotional experience with it, whether they are a people leader, somebody's partner, somebody's son. um, they will have to navigate menopause as well in a slightly different way, but nonetheless, they will need to navigate it. So it's not a niche topic, it will impact the whole of society and the whole of the workplace in some way, shape, or form. So I hope that's been useful. I hope you've scribbled down lots of data and you've got some figures that have made you think, and that you can now go away and tidy up into a nice, simple business case. There is a really strong one. I hope you agree. So the next steps I recommend for you, if you want to talk further about what this looks like in your workplace, because every workplace is different, then please feel free to book a discovery call with me. You'll see there, that's my Calendly link. So either take a screen grab of this, write it down, get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you. Or alternatively, you might think, I want to experience one of these programs so that we can see what it's like. And what we recommend is running a pilot session. So you might want to get a group of colleagues together from throughout the hierarchy, through different functional groups, to experience what one of our programs look like. We do want them to be meaningful. We do want them to elicit behavior change. And sometimes that's the best way to sort of start the conversation and then think about how do we adapt it for your business. We happily can come out and do that for you in a really simple way. Third step is to do nothing. I strongly recommend this option isn't the one you take. As you've seen from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, there is an expectation that employers do support menopause. And to do that, you need to make sure your leaders are equipped to do that. So that's one I wouldn't recommend. So before I finish up, I just want you to have a think and reflect about what's your biggest takeaway been from this session. Have a think about that. Please get in touch, send me a message. I'd love to hear from you about what you found useful. I'd love to hear from you all. I'll see you on the sounding board sessions, hopefully. And if you want any of my details, they're here on the screen. Take a screen grab, take a photo, and please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. If I can help you in any way with your menopause journey in your workplace, please get in touch. Thanks ever so much.